QuickBooks Online 2021, class tracking by division, selling and administrative expenses. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online 2021. Here we are in our QuickBooks Online practice file. We set up a free 30-day trial. Then we set up our chart of accounts down below. We can see that chart of accounts down below. We then turned on the account numbers to help us to basically make a multi-step income statement classifying our expenses in the format or with the subcategories of administrative and selling expenses. Let's take a look at our income statement by going up top, right-clicking on this tab. We're going to duplicate it 2 times. Right-click and duplicate. And then I'm going to go on the tab up top again, right-click on it again, and duplicate it again. And then we'll be opening up on the tab further to the right, the P&L, otherwise known as the profit and loss, or the income statement. Doing so by going to the reports on the left-hand side, selecting the good old P&L, profit and loss, and then we're going to be doing the date range change up top from 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. Run that report. Close up the hamburger, hold down control, scroll up just a bit to get to that 125%. Now we set up basically our multi-step income statement now. So a single step income statement we would just simply be income and then expenses. Getting down to the net income, we'll typically have multiple steps, possibly breaking out by selling and admin, which we can see here. We might want to add, say, a cost of goods sold type of column as well if we have inventory involved. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll do that real quick here. Let's go to the tab to the left-hand side, and let's just say we're going to add an invoice here. I'm just going to add an invoice, and we'll have inventory related to it. So I'm going to hold control, scroll down just a little bit. I'll make this go to customer 2. So this is going to be well, let's keep it to customer 1. It's fine. Customer number 1, and we'll include the date. And this time I'm going to try to add an inventory item. So I'm going to say inventory item down below. See if we can add that. I'm going to add an inventory item here. And I'm going to say that it's going to be inventory item. Inventory item, quantity on hand. We're going to say that we have currently 100 units on hand as of, let's say, last year. Let's make sure that it's before the date that I'm going to do the data input. So we'll say November 1st. And then reorder point, I'll keep that as is. Description, inventory part. Price, I'll keep that as is, and I'll just add the price as well. Let's say the price. I'm going to say $35,000 on the price, and then the cost of goods is going to be $15,000. So this then increasing the income, recording cost of goods when we sell this. I'm going to say save it and close it. And so there we have it, $35,000. What's this going to do when we record it? It's an invoice. It's going to increase accounts receivable for the $35,000. We're not going to be dealing with sales tax. The other side is going to go to revenue for the $35,000, and inventory is going to go down by the cost, which we set to be $15,000, which isn't our focus now. Our focus is on the other side, cost of goods sold, the expense related to us consuming the inventory in order to generate the revenue will go up by that $15,000 that we set up when creating the inventory part. Let's go ahead and save it and close it. Save it and close it. And that's okay. We're not assigning anything to a class at this point. Going back to our financial then, I'm going to then just run this again. So we have a fresh report. Now we have our cost of goods sold up top, and then our expenses, the other expenses broken out between selling and admin. We broke out by selling and admin by using the subclasses or the subcategory, not using classes. Now you can imagine here, well, what if I want to break this out in some other format? Maybe instead of having the super long format where I would have repetitive accounts up here, say utilities, for example, here and utilities here, I can make this shorter by having one utilities account that's breaking out by selling and admin on a column by column basis, or possibly I want to double check it and have a double check on it so that I have them broken out into subcategories here and by class. So that's what we'll take a look at now. Let's add the classes to this item. Now to add the classes, I'm going to first open the report that's going to be by class. Note that you can change an income statement to be run by class by hitting the drop down up top and simply changing it to classes down below. But let's add another report because there is a default report for it as well. And it's useful to have the two, a normal income statement and an income statement broken out by class open. Also note that as we do this, we're not going to be using locations because we want to use the classes when possible, because the classes will give us that extra functionality of being able to split a single transaction between two classes, whereas the locations do not do that. So if you only need like one dimension of another kind of column breakout, then you probably want to go with the class tracking and not the location tracking, because that makes it a little bit easier for you. It's a little more flexible for you to use that class tracking. So we're going to then go into the profit and loss here by class, profit and loss by class. I'll do the date range change up top. We're going to make this from 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. Run that report. And then I'm going to close up the hamburger here. And so now we've got our classes with the D1 and D2 that we have broken out here. So we'll try to replace the D1 and D2 and break out between classes that we'll set up, which will be selling and admin type classes. So let's go down to these items. We saw these in prior presentations. We broke out the utilities here and here. Let's try to reallocate that and say, instead of using D1 and D2, let's make it admin, selling, and admin. So this one I want to basically make into selling. So I'm going to select that item. I'm going to drill down on it. Going to drill down on it here. And so we'll go into that. That'll take us back to the transaction. I'm going to remove the location at this point. So I'll take the location out altogether. We're not really focused on the location, just on the class tracking. And if you don't need location and you only need one of these items, you might want to just turn location off, right? When you're doing your accounting. Class tracking, as you can see, has that added feature of allowing you to break one expense out into multiple items, which is a common use for class tracking. You might need to do some kind of allocation method, for example, to allocate an expense between admin and selling, or between, one expense and another expense for whatever reason, between divisions, departments, whatever. You could do so with classes. You can't do so quite as easily. You can't do so with the locations with one transaction. So then I'm going to make this one the selling. So I'm going to say this is going to be selling, and I'm going to add that. That's going to be a new class. We'll call it selling. I'm going to say save and close. Save it and close it. Scrolling back up and going back to the report. Now we've got our selling as one of them. Nothing is in D1, therefore that column has disappeared. We have the not specified class, meaning those are the items we haven't assigned a class to at all yet. And then D2, I'll do the same thing to. So D2, I'm going to go into this one. I'm going to make this an admin one because it's under the admin category. I'm going to go into it, drill down to the actual transactions, and then I'm going to get rid of the location. I'm not going to deal with the location right now. I'm going to make the class then admin. So admin. And I'll save that. That's a new class. Save it and close it. And then if I scroll back up top and check out our reports now we've got admin, selling, not specified. Now the fact that we have this not specified column is really nice, because the not specified column will tell us that we haven't assigned a class to something. And QuickBooks makes it really easy. It's really easy to go into QuickBooks and reassign things to a particular class. So you can go back into it and reassign something to a class, as we have seen here, by simply drilling down on it and then reassigning the items to a class. So we're basically looking down here. Let's continue to do this. We'll continue to do this, breaking it out so that we have both the selling and admin by subcategory and by class, and then possibly we'll rethink that and see if we can combine it together. So we'll see this in a couple different ways. Notice if I have both the subcategory here and the classes broke out, it's a bit redundant, but it's also a nice double check, because it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of double check, oh yeah, that's to the right account. It's a 6 account here, which means it's selling, and we put it to the proper amount or the proper class, which I can kind of use as a double check in that way. So sometimes that redundancy is actually useful, but we'll do it both ways. Now I'm going to go to everything that's in not specified down here, at least in the expenses, and reclassify. So this one is in unspecified. We want to put it into a class. Also note that you might be tempted to use the not specified as like a default, But I would recommend not doing that because you really want this not specified column to be a column to help you to have when there's an error, when something hasn't been specified. So I'm going to go down here and say, okay, let's go. This is going to be admin. Notice how easy it is to drill down on this and just reallocate. Obviously, if you have a whole lot of transactions, it can be tedious to do this, but you know, you can do it fairly easy, right? This is actually selling. So I'm going to say this is going to be selling. And we'll save that, save it, and close it. And I'm going to scroll back up top and pick that up. So we've got that in the selling. And then down here, we've got the auto. This is going to be admin down here. So I'm going to go into this, drill down on that. And I'm going to say we're going to go into here and drill down to the data input. And we're going to take this to admin. So there we have that. Save it and close it. And then scroll back up top and go back on to our report. This one needs to go to admin as well. So you can see it here. I'm going to go into that. And I'm going to take this to admin. So we'll say this needs to go to admin. And so there we have that. I'm going to save it and close it. So there we have that. And so we've broken out now our expenses, our normal expenses down here between selling and admin, both by column and by subcategory. We still have the sales items up top. We might want to assign this to one or the other, and I might just simply assign it to selling, just so we can remove the not specified column altogether. So I might say all income I'm going to apply to selling, for example. And then I'm going to go in here and say this is going to go to categorization class of selling. So we'll make that selling. Save that one. And then I'm going to go back to my report, and then this one, make that go to selling, and I'm going to go into that transaction, and we'll make that go to selling here, and then I'm going to say let's save that, save it and close it. And then if I go back up top, then now we've got and go back to our report, we've now got so I lost the report. Hold on a second. This is a profit and loss by class. Profit and loss by class. Back into that. Running the date range up top from 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. Running it. Okay, so now we don't have the anything that's not specified anymore. We simply have the selling and admin broken out in a nice vertical fashion. So, and we have this kind of double check here, and I could say, okay, here's the meals and entertainment. Note that if I had something in meals and entertainment that was with the 6 starting accounts, then I would assume it should, of course, be selling. But if I assigned a class that was admin, then I would know that something was wrong. In other words, if I break it out in this way, I should have nothing here in the admin area for these accounts. And if I do, then I know there's a problem and I can go in and fix it. That's why it's kind of a nice little double check, actually, you know, if you want to use that double check for the data input. Same with down here. Obviously, this space right here, there should be nothing there because this account is an admin account that's indicated by both the admin breakout here and by the class of admin. Therefore, if there's anything that's falling here, then we know that there's been an error and we can kind of double check it. So it gives us a bit of an internal control to have that double breakout. However, you don't need that, right? You could say, hey, look, this is redundant for me to have these items down here. I'm going to just assign auto, computer, and utilities to be in the 6 series numbers, but then just break them out with the use of the class tracking. So for example, I can go into these transactions down below and say, okay, I want to condense my statement to make it a little bit easier to look at. And I'm going to say here, I'm going to have it go to admin, but this time I want to make it go to, instead of 702, I'm going to make it go 60200. So now it's going to the auto still, but this time I'm going to have everything under the 6 series, so I don't need 2 different series of numbers and simply break it out by class. So if I save and close, and then I go back up top, then now we have this item here, right? So now it's in here. Now we have something in this category because we're not going to use these 7 series up top, and I can break out the auto between admin and selling. Note here, you don't have the double check here. So if something is not specified, then you might not know, which one it goes to. If there's an error, it's easier to make an error on it because we only have one account. We're simply breaking out then by class to that account. So I'm going to do the same thing down here, the computer and utilities. I'm going to go into that transaction here. So we'll go into that transaction, and I'm going to say this is going to be 61700, 61700, computer and internet. And then I'm going to save it and close it. It's still in the admin class, and that's the only thing that's going to be distinguishing between the two is the fact that it is in that admin class. So there it is right there. And then we can see this most clearly with the utilities because we have utilities broken out between the two. I'm just going to use the same account this time, but break out between admin and selling with the use of the class tracking. So we'll go into this item here, and we'll say that I want to make this then 68600, 68600 for the utilities. Save it and close it. Scroll back up top. And now we have everything in the 6 series. We no longer need this subcategorization. I won't remove it, but we don't need to make these subcategories now because we're breaking out by admin and selling with the vertical columns of the classes. And you can see here in the utilities, for example, we have the same account over here broken out between admin and selling with simply the breakout in terms of the columns. And that allows us to use this kind of subcategorization for other types of things. I might want to use this subcategorization for other types of things. So you can see how these different combinations could lead to different companies wanting to set up their chart of accounts differently. There's a whole lot of different combinations that you could start to imagine how you might want to set up a chart of accounts, and it really is more dependent on the type of company that you're using as to, do you want to break things out by class, or do you want to break them out by a vertical chart of accounts? Do you want to have some kind of double check with the data input to make the data input a little bit easier by having both a class and an account that will be different by, say, location or something like that? How do you want to apply the subcategories? And then, of course, when you factor in locations on top of that, where you could sort by location, which is something that's going to group the entire transaction together, as opposed to being able to break out a single transaction between multiple classes, then again, it's another factor. It's really nice to have all these different kind of ways that you can break out the information. But again, obviously, with all those different combinations, it can be there's no one answer for any particular company. You can set up your books in a whole lot of different ways. Now, let's just take a quick note on the balance sheet here. You might say, well, what about the balance sheet and all this? The class tracking isn't normally thought of on the balance sheet. If you have the advanced level up from the plus, then you can do a balance sheet as well with class tracking. But notice that because you can break out one expense account between multiple classes, it can cause the balance sheet by class to be out of balance. And it'll have to basically, you'll have to make sure that if you're using that for whatever reason, that you're making sure that you're entering stuff into the balance sheet in such a way that it'll tie out. Now, if you're using locations, that's one of the great things about locations. If you are using it on the balance sheet side of things, then because the whole transaction will have to be using one location instead of breaking out between like multiple expense accounts, then the balance sheet should work better if you're using the balance sheet by location. It can kind of force the balance sheet to be more in balance, whereas the class tracking, you have a lot more flexibility on the income statement, but it could potentially mess up the balance sheet unless you're careful. So in any case, if we go to the balance sheet, if I go to the tab to the left and then I hit the drop down and we go down to the reports down below, let's just open up the good old balance sheet here, and we'll make this as of 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. Run that report, close the burger, and then if we scroll down, we've got our information up top that has been populated as we've entered the data, and then the income statement is then going to be rolling into the net income. So notice it's going to be here. Income statement total, which is the 28,380, is rolling into the balance sheet, no matter what class it's in. So it's all rolling in to the net income. And then if I go one date up, it's going to roll into whatever the equity account, which I believe is going to be retained earnings at this point. So net income rolled into basically the retained earnings. So no matter how we break out the income statement, which is a timing statement, it will then roll into the balance sheet. Net income, bottom line total net income, no matter what the class is, will roll into the balance sheet if we just have a normal balance sheet. And that works fairly well because oftentimes we want to see that detailed information basically on the income statement. If you want the balance sheet by class, possibly you're saying, hey, I got different locations on the balance sheet, then that's when you may not want to, you may have to level up, number one, to do that, to get a balance sheet by class from the normal QuickBooks Online. And then number two, you might then want to say use locations, because you're if possible, knowing that limits your flexibility on the income statement to do allocations, but making it less likely that you have a balance sheet by class that will be out of balance as it allocates to different classes on the balance sheet side of things. Not different classes, but similar balance. It allocates to different locations, which is similar to classes on the balance sheet. But because you have that restriction, it's less likely that the different locations will be out of balance. Whereas if you use classes, because of the more flexibility, it is more likely that the balance sheet items by class would be out of balance, and you'd have to be careful on that.